David Harrison wiped his hands on his overalls and glanced at his watch. It was 4:30 p.m. on Monday, time to close Harrison and Sons Auto Repair Shop, although he didn't have any sons yet. He had inherited the name from his father along with the business 3 years ago. Everyone in O'Fallon knew the shop. It was the only place within 20 miles that could repair any car properly. In a week, he would marry Emily Thompson, and she would become Emily Harrison. The thought still seemed incredible to him. A beautiful, intelligent woman had agreed to be his wife. He smiled as he imagined them living in the house on Maple Street that he had bought last year, especially for their future family. David closed the garage and headed for his Ford pickup truck. He needed to stop by the O'Fallon hospital where Emily worked. She was finishing her shift at 5, and he always tried to give her a ride home. Not because she didn't have a car, he just liked seeing her smile every day when she came out of the building in her white administrator's uniform. O'Fallon Hospital was a 2-story brick building built in the 1970s. Only 30 people worked there, and they all knew each other by name. Emily was in charge of the front desk. She greeted patients, filed paperwork, and coordinated the doctor's schedules. The job wasn't highly paid, but in a small town there weren't many options. David parked at the entrance and saw Emily talking to a tall man in an expensive suit. The stranger was holding a professional camera. David frowned. He didn't recognize the man, and in a town of 8,000 people, everyone knew everyone else. "Hi, honey," he said, approaching Emily. "Who's that?" Emily flinched slightly but quickly smiled. "David, meet Klaus Wagner, the photographer. He's going to be taking pictures of our wedding." Klaus held out his hand. He was about the same age as David, but looked more refined. His dark hair was neatly combed. He wore an expensive watch on his wrist, and his white shirt was immaculate. Everything about him said he wasn't from around here. "Nice to meet you," Klaus said with a slight accent. "Emily told me you're a mechanic. I respect people who work with their hands." "Thanks," David replied, shaking the photographer's hand. The handshake was firm, but Klaus's palms were soft, without calluses. "Where are you from? You don't look like you're from around here." "I'm from St. Louis. I specialize in wedding photography. Emily found me online." David looked at the bride. They had discussed photographers just a few days ago, and Emily had said she hadn't made up her mind yet. When had she found Klaus and made arrangements with him? "We were just discussing the details of the shoot," Emily continued. "Klaus has some very interesting ideas for the photo session." "I've been researching your city," Klaus said. "There are some wonderful places to shoot. The old St. Patrick's Church, the bridge over the Missouri River, the park with the century-old oak trees. The photos will be very romantic." David nodded, but something about Klaus's manner made him wary. The photographer was looking at Emily too much, and she was returning his gaze. Maybe he was just jealous for no reason? "We should go," David said. "Dinner will get cold." "Of course," Emily agreed. "Klaus will definitely call you tomorrow and discuss all the details." "I'll be waiting," the photographer replied, bowing slightly. David opened the door of the pickup for Emily. She got into the front seat, smoothed her blonde hair, and looked in the side mirror. "He's a handsome man," she said casually. "Who?" David asked, starting the engine. "Klaus, the photographer. He has an interesting face, very photogenic." "If you think so," David muttered. They drove down Main Street toward the O'Fallon house, which looked especially cozy in the rays of the setting sun. Small houses with well-kept lawns, old maple trees along the road, a few shops in the center of town. It was quiet and peaceful here, the perfect place to start a family. When did you find this photographer?" David asked. "We were talking yesterday about how we hadn't chosen one yet." "This morning. I was looking at his work online and I really liked it. I decided to call right away before someone else snapped him up." David stopped at the red light at the only traffic light in town. He turned to Emily. "Why didn't you ask me? We agreed to make these decisions together." "Honey, you said you trusted me to choose, and besides, the wedding is in a week. We had to decide quickly." Emily put her hand on his shoulder. Her touch was warm and familiar. "You're right," David agreed. "I just want everything to be perfect." "Everything will be perfect," Emily smiled. "I promise." The house on Maple Street greeted them with the smell of fried chicken. David's mother, Dolores Harrison, was cooking dinner for the second day in a row. Since her husband's death 5 years ago, she had been visiting her son often, especially now that the wedding was approaching. "Hello, Mrs. Harrison," Emily said as she entered the kitchen. "I've asked you so many times to call me Mom. In a week, we'll be family." Dolores was a sturdy woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She had worked at O'Fallon Elementary School for 30 years and knew half the town as children. "How's work?" she asked, setting the table. "The usual," Emily replied. "I met our wedding photographer today. He's very professional." "I hope he's not too expensive," Dolores said. "Everything is so expensive these days." "The price is reasonable," Emily assured her, "and the quality of his work is excellent." David listened silently. Emily didn't mention that the photographer was from St. Louis and not local. Why? He decided not to think about it. Over dinner, Dolores talked about the latest wedding preparations. The church was booked. The banquet hall at the O'Fallon Inn was ready, and the menu had been finalized. 75 people were invited, practically the entire town. "Where will your friend be staying?" Dolores asked Emily. "Sharon, I believe?" "Sharon Davis, my maid of honor. She's staying with me. She'll be here Friday evening." "She's from Chicago, right?" David asked. "Yes, we went to college together. She works at an advertising agency." David remembered Sharon from a few encounters. She was an energetic, vibrant girl, the complete opposite of the quiet Emily. They had been friends for 10 years, ever since they met in the dorms at St. Louis College. "She'll probably be bored in our little town," Dolores remarked. "Sharon's very adaptable," Emily smiled. "She's very happy for us." After dinner, Dolores went home, leaving David and Emily alone. They sat on the porch, looked at the stars, and planned their honeymoon in Colorado Springs. "David," Emily said quietly, "are you happy?" "Of course," he replied, hugging her. "Are you?" "Very. Sometimes I feel like this is all a dream." "It's not a dream. In a week, you'll be my wife, and we'll live here in this house and raise children." Emily leaned against his shoulder. In the moonlight, her face seemed especially beautiful. "I love you," she whispered. "And I love you," David replied. But deep down, he still felt a strange sense of unease. Something about Emily's behavior had changed over the past few weeks. She had become more distracted, often lost in thought, sometimes not hearing him when he spoke to her. Maybe it was just pre-wedding jitters? Emily got up and went into the house. David sat on the porch for a few more minutes, looking at the quiet street. At 9 o'clock in the evening, everything was quiet in O'Fallon. Only the streetlights and the lights in the houses were on. Tomorrow would be a new day, one day closer to the wedding. David tried to push the anxious thoughts away. Emily loved him. They were getting married soon, and everything would be fine. That's how it should be in the perfect world of a small American town. Emily woke up in her apartment on Cherry Street on Thursday morning with a heavy feeling in her chest. There were only 3 days left until the wedding, and she felt like she was standing on the edge of a precipice. The phone on the nightstand was silent, but she knew Klaus would text or call. He always did. Their romance had begun 4 months earlier, completely by chance. Emily was on her way to St. Louis for a continuing education course for medical administrators. In the coffee shop of the hotel where the classes were held, she bumped into a tall stranger who was taking pictures of the interior. She spilled coffee on his expensive shirt. "I'm so clumsy," she apologized. "It's okay," he smiled with a slight accent. "Klaus Wagner." "Are you here for the conference?" That's how they met. Klaus turned out to be a professional photographer who shot corporate events. He was charming, witty, spoke 3 languages, and traveled extensively. He was the complete opposite of David, with his quiet life in a small town. On the first day, they just talked. On the second, he asked her out to dinner. By the end of the week, Emily realized she was in love in a way she had never been with David. It was an intoxicating feeling that made her head spin. The phone rang. Klaus. "Good morning, beautiful." His voice was soft and intimate. "How did you sleep?" "Bad," Emily admitted. "I couldn't stop thinking about you." "I've been thinking about you, too. When can we see each other?" Klaus, the wedding is in 3 days. This is crazy. That's exactly why we need to meet. Emily, you can't marry a man you don't love. I love David, she said, but even she couldn't convince herself. You respect him. That's different. We'll meet tonight at the same place. The same place was the Riverview Motel, 30 miles from O'Fallon. They had been meeting there every 2 weeks for the past 4 months. Emily told David she was visiting a friend in a neighboring town. I can't, Emily whispered. Sharon is coming tomorrow and I have to finish the last of the preparations today. Then tomorrow, after your friend goes to bed. Klaus, I'll wait for you in room 12. We need to talk, Emily. Seriously talk. He hung up. Emily sat down on the bed and covered her face with her hands. How had she gotten to this point? 4 months ago, she had been a happy bride-to-be, preparing for her wedding to a good, reliable man. And now she was cheating on him with a photographer from the big city. At 8 in the morning, Emily was already at the hospital. Work helped distract her from thoughts of Klaus. But even as she filled out medical forms, she thought about how he had kissed her for the last time, how he had whispered that he couldn't live without her. Emily, you've been so distracted lately, said Betty Walker, the head nurse. Pre-wedding jitters? Probably, Emily smiled. There's so much to do. I remember my wedding 30 years ago. I thought I would go crazy with excitement. But then everything went smoothly. Betty was a kind woman who had worked at O'Fallon Hospital for 20 years. She treated Emily like a daughter. Betty, did you ever have any doubts? Emily asked. Before the wedding? Of course, dear. That's normal. Getting married is scary. You're committing your life to another person forever. What if you realize you love someone else? Betty looked at her intently. Emily, is there something you want to talk about? No, Emily replied quickly. Just theoretically. Then theoretically, if you have doubts about your feelings for your fiancé, it's better to postpone the wedding than to regret it for the rest of your life. Emily nodded and went back to work. But Betty's words stuck in her mind. Postpone the wedding? That would mean confessing her infidelity to David, breaking his heart, and becoming an outcast in a small town. Everything was already set, the guests were invited, and the money had been spent. At lunchtime, the hospital phone rang. Emily picked up the receiver. O'Fallon Hospital, Emily Thompson speaking. Hi, this is Sharon. I'm on my way and will be there in 3 hours. Sharon Davis was the only person who knew about Emily's affair. She had found out a month ago when she came to visit for the weekend. Emily was so excited after her meeting with Klaus that she couldn't hide the truth from her best friend. Sharon, I'm so glad you're coming, Emily said. I need to talk to you. I know what you want to talk about. And my answer is the same. You're playing with fire, Emily. This has to end. We'll talk when you get here. Emily hung up. Sharon didn't understand. She lived in a big city, dated different men, had her pick. Emily had spent her whole life in O'Fallon, where choices were limited. David was the most eligible bachelor in town, and everyone considered her lucky. But Klaus had shown her a different life. He told her about Europe, where he had lived for several years, about working with famous people, about his plans to open his own gallery. With him, she felt alive, desired, special. At 4 o'clock, David entered the hospital. He was holding a bouquet of wildflowers. Hi, honey, how are you? I'm fine, Emily smiled, accepting the flowers. Thank you, they're beautiful. I decided to come early. I want to help with the preparations for Sharon's arrival. David was so caring, so predictable. Emily felt terrible. How could she cheat on such a good man? David, have you ever wanted to leave O'Fallon? She asked. Why would I? This is my home, my business, my family. Everything I need. What if I wanted to move? David looked at her in surprise. Where? Why? I just want to see the world. Live in a big city. We've talked about this. After the honeymoon, we'll go on a trip. Maybe even to Europe. Yes, of course, Emily agreed. It's just a dream sometimes. David hugged her. We're getting married in 3 days. Then we'll have our whole lives to travel. Emily pressed herself against his chest. David smelled of oil and metal, the smells of his work. Klaus smelled of expensive cologne and photo fixative. At 5 in the evening, They drove to Emily's house to prepare for Sharon's arrival. Emily lived in a small apartment above Mrs. Peters' hair salon. 2 rooms and a small kitchen, but it was enough for one person. After the wedding, she would move into David's house. "Tomorrow I'll have to pick up my suit from the dry cleaners," David said, helping to tidy up the bedroom, "and check that everything is ready in the banquet hall." "I'll call the hotel in the morning," Emily promised. "And the photographer, Klaus? Have you arranged everything with him?" "Yes. He's coming on Saturday morning. He'll be taking pictures of the preparations, the ceremony, and the reception." David nodded, but Emily noticed that he frowned when Klaus's name was mentioned. "David, is there something you don't like about him?" "I don't know. There's something about him. He's too smooth, I guess." Emily felt her heart beat faster. Could David suspect something? "He's just a professional," she said. "He's used to working with people." "Maybe," David agreed. "The main thing is that the photos turn out well." At 7 o'clock, Sharon arrived. She looked as elegant as ever, in an expensive suit with immaculate makeup and hair. Sharon was an art director at a Chicago advertising agency and earned more money than most people in Fallon did in a year. "Hi, country bumpkin," she laughed, hugging Emily. "Ready to be a married woman?" "Hi, Sharon," David smiled. "How did you get here?" "Fine, just your roads are terrible. I almost got stuck in a pothole." Sharon had always been straightforward. She never hid the fact that she considered O'Fallon a backwater and Emily's choice a mistake. But she loved her friend and agreed to be her maid of honor. David stayed for dinner and then went home, leaving the friends alone. As soon as the door closed behind him, Sharon looked seriously at Emily. "So, how's it going with your photographer?" "Shh," Emily whispered, even though they were alone. "He's going to photograph the wedding." "What?" Sharon exclaimed. "Are you out of your mind?" "I didn't know what to do. He called and offered his services and I said yes." "Emily, that's completely insane. You're going to marry a man and your lover is going to photograph it?" "He's not my lover," Emily protested weakly. "Then who is he? Just a friend you meet in motels?" Emily lowered her head. Sharon was right. The situation was absurd and dangerous. "I can't live without him," Emily admitted. "When we're together, I feel like a different person. Alive, desired." "What about David?" "With David, it's calm, safe. He's a good man, but there's no passion between us." Sharon sat down next to her friend. "Emily, listen to me carefully. Passion is wonderful, but it can't be the basis for a marriage. Klaus lives in another city. He has a completely different life. What do you know about him?" "Enough," Emily replied, but her voice sounded uncertain. "Is he married?" "Divorced." "Children?" Emily fell silent. She had never asked Klaus about children. "See, you don't know anything about him. David loves you. He's ready to give you a home, a family, stability. But I don't feel what a woman should feel for a husband. Feelings can be developed. Love is a choice you make every day." Sharon took her friend's hand. "Emily, if you don't stop now, this will end badly. Very badly." "I'm seeing Klaus tomorrow night," Emily said quietly. "I need to decide everything before the wedding." Sharon sighed. "Then I'll go with you." "What?" "I want to see this man who has brought my best friend to this state." "Sharon, no. This is my problem. Now it's mine, too. I'm your maid of honor, and I won't let you ruin your life." They talked late into the night. Sharon tried to convince Emily to break up with Klaus and marry David. Emily wavered between her head and her heart. The next day, Friday, Emily worked at the hospital in a state close to hysteria. The wedding was in 2 days, and she was going to meet her lover. Sharon was right. It was madness. That evening, after telling David that she and Sharon were going shopping in a neighboring town, Emily drove to the Riverview Motel. Sharon sat silently beside her, clearly disapproving of the trip. The Riverview Motel was a typical cheap roadside establishment. Room 12 was at the end of the corridor. Emily knocked. Klaus opened the door. He was wearing jeans and a white shirt, his hair slightly tousled. When he saw Sharon, he was surprised. "You didn't say anyone was coming with you." "This is Sharon, my friend. She wanted to meet you." Klaus invited them in. The room was small and modest. There was a bottle of wine and 2 candles on the table. "So, you're the photographer," Sharon said, looking Klaus up and down. And you're the friend from Chicago. Emily told me a lot about you. I doubt it, Sharon replied coldly. Tension immediately arose between them. Klaus was used to charming people, but Sharon was hostile toward him. Emily, we need to talk, Klaus said. Alone. You can say whatever you want to say in front of me, Sharon declared. I'm her best friend. Sharon, please, Emily pleaded. Her friend reluctantly left the room. She and Klaus were left alone. Emily, you can't get married tomorrow, he said, hugging her. Come away with me, right now. Klaus, I can't. My life is here, my family, my work. Your life is with me. I love you. He kissed her, and for a moment Emily forgot everything, but then the voice of reason rang in her head. What are you offering me? She asked. To be your mistress? Become my wife. We'll get married as soon as you divorce David. But I have to marry him tomorrow. Then don't. Tell him you changed your mind. Emily imagined David's face when she told him the truth. She imagined the reaction of his mother, his friends, the whole town. The scandal would be enormous. I can't, she whispered. It's too late to change anything. Klaus stepped back. So you choose him. I don't know what I'm choosing. Give me time to think. Time? Emily, tomorrow you'll be a married woman. What time? She began to cry. Klaus hugged her. All right, get married, but I'll wait for you. When you realize you've made a mistake, come to me. What if I don't realize it? You will, he said confidently. You can't live with someone you don't love. Emily returned to the car with tears in her eyes. Sharon started the engine silently. So, what did you decide? She asked on the way home. I'm marrying David, Emily said. Tomorrow is my wedding day. That's the right decision, Sharon approved. And what about the photographer? Yes, Emily lied. It's over. But deep down, she knew it wasn't over. Tomorrow, Klaus would be photographing her wedding, and she couldn't imagine how she would get through it. Saturday, June 15th, wedding day. Emily woke up at 5:30 in the morning to the sound of rain on the roof. Her heart sank. Rain on your wedding day was considered a bad omen. She went to the window and saw gray clouds over O'Fallon. But by 7, the rain had stopped and the sun was shining. Sharon was already awake, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. Good morning, bride, she said, but there was no joy in her voice. Did you sleep well? I hardly slept, Emily admitted. I kept thinking about yesterday. I hope you were thinking the right thoughts. Emily sat down next to her friend. Sharon, what if I'm making a mistake? What exactly? Marrying a good man or breaking up with a married photographer? He's not married. He's divorced. Did you check? Emily fell silent. No, she hadn't checked. She believed Klaus's words. It doesn't matter, she said. Today, I'm marrying David. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Dolores Harrison arrived with 2 boxes of breakfast and a bouquet of white roses. Girls, you need to eat well, she said. You have a long day ahead of you. Thank you, Mrs. Harrison. Sharon smiled. It looks delicious. How's David? Emily asked. He's nervous, like a schoolboy before an exam. He's checked his suit 3 times and gone through his rings twice. He says he's afraid he'll forget something. Emily felt a pang of guilt. David was so nervous about their wedding, and she had spent the whole night thinking about another man. Mom, what time is the photographer coming? Emily asked. 10, I think. He wants to photograph the bride getting ready. At 10 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Emily opened it to find Klaus standing there with 2 cameras and a large bag of equipment. He was wearing a black suit and looked impeccable. Good morning, he said in a formal tone. May I come in? Of course, Emily replied, trying to sound natural. Klaus entered the apartment. Sharon nodded coldly at him, while Dolores smiled broadly. What an elegant young man. David said you're from St. Louis? Yes, ma'am, I specialize in wedding photography. Wonderful. Emily, you need to start getting ready. The hairdresser will be here at 11. Klaus began setting up his equipment. Emily noticed him glance at her several times, but each time their eyes met only for a second. Where will you be getting changed? He asked. In the bedroom, Dolores replied. The lighting is good there, by the mirror. Great, I'll film the preparations, and then we'll head to the church. At 11, Mary Thompson, the local hairdresser, arrived. She had been working at the salon on Main Street for 15 years and did the hair of all the brides in O'Fallon. "Emily, dear, what a happy day," she exclaimed. "David is such a nice boy." While Mary worked on Emily's hair, Klaus filmed the process. He was professional and reserved, but Emily felt his presence with every fiber of her being. "Turn your head slightly to the left," he said. "That's it, good." His voice was even and businesslike. No one could suspect that there was anything between them. Sharon helped with the makeup. She had experience in advertising and knew a lot about cosmetics. "Don't overdo the eyeshadow," she advised. "The lighting will be soft in the church." By 12, Emily was ready. The wedding dress was simple but elegant. Silk fabric, lace sleeves, a long skirt. She had inherited it from her mother, who had died 5 years earlier. "You look beautiful," Dolores said with tears in her eyes. "Your mother would have been so proud." Klaus was filming everything. Emily tried not to look at him, but she could feel his gaze. "A few portraits by the window," he said. "The light is perfect." Emily stood by the window. The sun lit up her face, creating a soft halo around her head. "Look at the camera," Klaus said. "Smile." Their eyes met through the lens. For a moment, the world stood still. Then Klaus lowered the camera. "Great shots," he said. "Let's go to the church." St. Patrick's Church was the most beautiful building in O'Fallon. Built in 1920, it could hold 200 people. Today it was decorated with white lilies and roses. Guests were already gathering. Emily saw familiar faces, neighbors, co-workers, family friends. The whole town had come to see the wedding. In a separate room next to the church, Emily waited for the ceremony to begin. Sharon, Dolores, and Father Jones were with her. "Emily, are you ready?" Father Jones asked. "David is already at the altar." "I'm ready," she replied, although her voice was trembling. Wedding music began to play. Sharon was the first to walk down the aisle as the maid of honor. Then it was Emily's turn. The church doors opened. Emily saw David at the altar in a dark blue suit. He was smiling so broadly that it hurt her heart. Standing next to him was his best friend, Mike Johnson, as the best man. Emily walked slowly down the aisle. The guests stood and smiled. Klaus was filming the ceremony from different angles, but she tried not to notice him. "Dear friends," Father Jones began, "we are gathered here today to join David Harrison and Emily Thompson in holy matrimony." Emily listened to the familiar words, but they seemed strange and unreal to her. She looked at David and saw sincere love in his eyes. "David, do you take Emily to be your wife, to love and cherish her in sickness and in health, in poverty and in wealth, until death do you part?" "I do," David said firmly. "Emily, do you take David to be your husband, promising to love him in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, until death do you part?" Emily fell silent. The church fell silent. Everyone looked at her. David frowned slightly. "Yes," she finally said. They exchanged rings. David kissed her tenderly. The guests applauded. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," said Father Jones. Emily Thompson became Emily Harrison. After the ceremony, the guests moved to the banquet hall of the O'Fallon Inn. The hall was decorated with flowers, and the tables were covered with white tablecloths. Klaus continued to photograph the celebration. "Let's take a family photo," suggested Dolores. They took several group photos. Emily tried to smile, but it came out forced. "Now just the newlyweds," said Klaus. David put his arm around Emily's waist. She leaned against his shoulder. "What a beautiful couple," Klaus remarked as he took pictures. "You can see they love each other." Emily shuddered at his words. Was there a hidden meaning? The banquet began. Dolores made a toast to the newlyweds. Mike Johnson told a funny story about how David and Emily met. Sharon spoke about friendship and loyalty. "To David and Emily," Father Jones raised his glass. "May their marriage be long and happy." Everyone drank the champagne. Emily took a sip of wine, but a lump formed in her throat. "Honey, you look pale," David said. "Are you tired?" "A little," she replied. "It's been an exciting day. We'll go to the hotel soon and you can rest." Etta James's "At Last" played as the first dance song. David led Emily to the center of the room. They danced slowly as the guests looked on fondly. "I'm so happy," David whispered in her ear. "Now you're my wife." "I'm happy too," Emily lied. Klaus filmed their dance. Through the camera lens, they looked like the perfect couple, but Emily knew the truth. By 9 o'clock, the reception was coming to an end. The older guests began to leave. The younger ones danced to the music of a local band. "It's time to go to the hotel," David said. "We're flying out to Colorado early tomorrow morning." They had booked a room at the same hotel, the O'Fallon Inn, for their wedding night. Tomorrow morning, they were supposed to fly to Denver for their honeymoon. The guests saw the newlyweds off with rice and rose petals. Klaus filmed them leaving the hotel. "Thanks for your work," David said, shaking his hand. "When will the photos be ready?" "In a week," Klaus replied. "I'll bring them myself." "Great. Goodbye." David and Emily went up to their room on the second floor. Sharon had left for Chicago right after the reception, wishing her friend happiness. The room was beautifully decorated, rose petals on the bed, champagne in an ice bucket, candles on the table. "What a romantic room," said Emily. "Only the best for my wife," smiled David. He opened the champagne and poured 2 glasses. "To us," he said. "To us," Emily repeated. They drank the champagne. David kissed his wife tenderly. I want to take a shower," she said. "It's been a long day." "Of course, dear." Emily went into the bathroom and turned on the water. She looked at herself in the mirror, white dress, wedding hairstyle, wedding ring on her finger. She was married, Mrs. Harrison. But instead of joy, there was emptiness in her heart. She thought about Klaus, about what he had said yesterday at the motel. He had offered her a different life, but she had chosen the safe one. When she came out of the bathroom in her white robe, David was sitting on the bed, leafing through a folder. "What's that?" she asked. "Photos from the wedding rehearsal. Klaus let me look at them." Emily felt a chill. "What photos?" "Can I see?" she asked, trying to sound calm. David handed her the folder. Emily opened it and saw photos from the rehearsal at the church. Everything looked normal until she got to the last few pictures. The photos were of her and Klaus at the Riverview Motel. They were kissing. The date on the photo was yesterday. Emily dropped the folder. The photos scattered across the floor. David picked up one of the photos and looked at it closely. "Emily," he said quietly, "what is this?" The silence in the room was deafening. David was holding a photo of his new wife kissing another man. The date in the corner of the photo was June 14th, yesterday, the day before their wedding. "David, I can explain," Emily whispered, picking up the scattered photos. "Explain what?" David's voice was strangely calm. "That you cheated on me with our wedding photographer?" Emily sat down on the edge of the bed. Her hands were shaking. "It's not what you think." "What do I think, Emily?" David stood up and began pacing the room. "I think that my wife, who an hour ago swore her fidelity to me before God, has been seeing another man for several months." "How do you know it's been several months?" "Because I'm not an idiot." David raised his voice for the first time. "Your absent-mindedness, your constant trips to see your friend, your changed behavior. I thought it was pre-wedding nerves." Emily began to cry. "David, I'm sorry. I didn't want this to happen." "But it did. And yesterday, on the eve of our wedding, you were with him." David looked at the photo again. Klaus clearly knew what he was doing when he left these pictures in the folder. It wasn't an accident. "Was he blackmailing you with these photos?" "No," Emily sobbed. "He loves me." "Loves you?" David laughed bitterly. A loving man doesn't plant compromising photos on his mistress's wedding day with another man. Emily raised her head. "What do you mean?" "Klaus left those photos there on purpose for me to find. It was a trap, Emily, for both of us." David sat down opposite his wife. In his eyes, she saw pain slowly turning to rage. "How many times?" he asked quietly. "David, don't." "How many times were you with him?" "I didn't count." "Count!" Emily flinched at his tone. David had never raised his voice to her before. "Maybe 10, 15 times. We met every 2 weeks. 4 months, David calculated. 4 months you've been living a double life." "I tried to stop. Yesterday I told him it was over." And what did he say? Emily fell silent. She couldn't tell David that Klaus had asked her to run away with him. He said he'd wait, she finally admitted. David nodded slowly. I see. So our marriage is just a temporary solution for you, until you decide what to do next. No, David, I chose you. I married you. After you slept with him the night before the wedding. Emily blushed. David realized he had guessed correctly. So you didn't just kiss him, he said with disgust. On our wedding night, you smell like another man. David, please. Please what? Forgive and forget? Pretend it never happened? David stood up and walked over to the window. Below, he could see the lights of O'Fallon, a small town where everyone knew each other. Tomorrow, the whole town would be talking about his wedding, and he would know the truth. Do you love him? He asked without turning around. David, just answer me. Do you love him? Yes, Emily whispered. But I love you too. In different ways? Yes, I love you like a brother, like a friend. You make me feel safe. And him? I love him passionately. He makes me feel alive. David slowly turned to her. His face wore an expression Emily had never seen before. So I'm just a boring, reliable option for you. A safe haven. You're a good man, David, the best I know. But not good enough for you to be faithful to me. Emily got out of bed. What now? Are you going to divorce me? We got married an hour ago, Emily. An hour ago. David grabbed the bottle of champagne from the table and threw it against the wall. The bottle shattered, champagne spilling onto the wallpaper. I've dreamed of a woman like you my whole life. Smart, beautiful, kind. I thought I was lucky. I thought you loved me. I do love you. Like a brother, David shouted. You married me out of pity. That's not true. Then how? Explain to me how you can love two men at the same time? Emily approached him. David, people are complicated. Feelings are complicated. I didn't plan to fall in love with Klaus. But you did, and you kept making plans for our wedding. Because I wanted to be with you. I wanted a normal, stable life. And get your passion on the side? Emily didn't answer. David realized he had hit the nail on the head. God, he said, you plan to continue seeing him after the wedding. No, you're lying. He said he would wait, and you didn't tell him a decisive no. David sat down on a chair and covered his face with his hands. All my friends envied me. David Harrison was marrying the most beautiful girl in town, and I was just a convenient option. David, don't say that. What else can I say? I'm a bank account, a house, respectability to you, and he's an adventure. The room fell silent again. Emily sat down next to her husband. What should we do? I don't know, David replied. I honestly don't know. He raised his head and looked at his wife. In her eyes, he saw guilt, but not remorse, not love, only pity. You're still thinking about him, he said. No. You are. I wonder what he's doing right now. Wondering if he regrets setting us up. Maybe he didn't do it on purpose. Emily, wake up. He's a professional photographer. Pictures like these don't end up in a folder by accident. David stood up and walked back to the broken photos on the floor. You know what hurts the most? Not that you cheated on me. It's that you lied to me every day. You looked me in the eyes and lied. I wanted to tell you the truth. When? After the honeymoon? A year later? When we had children? At the word children, Emily turned pale. David, I didn't plan to have children with you while I was with another man. But you planned to have them while hiding your affair from me. David picked up one of the photos from the floor. In it, Emily was smiling at Klaus the way she had never smiled at him. Look at yourself, he said, showing her the photo. See that smile? That's the real you. You were just playing a role with me. That's not true. It is, Emily, the bitter truth. David slowly tore the photo in half. Don't! Emily cried. Why? That's not us! That's you and your lover! He tore another photo. Emily tried to grab the photos from him, but David pushed her away. David, stop! No, I won't stop! He tore the photos one by one. His movements were filled with the rage of despair. You ruined my life, he shouted. You turned the happiest day of my life into a nightmare. David, you're scaring me. Scaring you? Didn't you think about how scared I'd be when I found out the truth? Emily backed toward the door. I'll go and give you some time to calm down. You're not going anywhere. David grabbed her arm. We're husband and wife, officially, before God and man. David, let me go. You're hurting me. Hurting you? He laughed hysterically. And I'm not hurting you. Finding out that just a few hours ago, my wife was in bed with another man? I wasn't in bed with him yesterday. No? Then what? Just kissing? Emily fell silent. David realized she was lying again. So you were, he said quietly. On our wedding day, you were with him. Something in David's voice made Emily truly afraid. She tried to break free, but his grip was iron. David, please let me go. We'll talk in the morning when you've calmed down. Calm down? His eyes flashed with fire. I'll never calm down. I'll never be able to forget what you did. We'll find a way out. What way out? You'll pretend to love me while you think about him? David pushed Emily, and she fell onto the bed among the rose petals. Do you know what I'll see every time you're near me? Those photos? You in his arms? David, stop! No, I won't stop! He grabbed a pillow from the bed. Did you think I'd never find out? Did you think I'd play the role of a husband while you had fun with your lover? David, no! Emily tried to get up, but David pinned her down with the pillow in his hands. You ruined my life, he shouted. You turned me into a laughing stock. The pillow covered Emily's face. She tried to break free, but David was stronger. His rage gave him superhuman strength. David, I can't breathe. But he couldn't hear her words. All he could hear were his own thoughts. She cheated on me. She lied to me. She made a fool of me. Emily struggled under the pillow, but her movements grew weaker and weaker. David pressed the pillow down with all his might, not realizing what he was doing. When he finally removed the pillow, Emily lay motionless. Her eyes were closed, and she wasn't breathing. Em? He called softly. Emily? He shook her shoulders. No response. Emily, wake up! David tried to find his wife's pulse on her neck. Nothing. Only then did it dawn on him what he had done. He had killed his wife. On their wedding night, an hour after the ceremony, David recoiled from the bed. His hands were shaking. The room was deathly silent. Emily lay in her wedding dress amid white rose petals that now looked like funeral flowers. David sat down on the floor and covered his face with his hands. What had he done? What would happen now? He looked at his watch. It was 10:30 in the evening. The guests had long since left. The hotel was quiet. David stood up and walked over to the phone. With trembling fingers, he dialed the number. Fallon County Sheriff's Department. This is Officer Thompson. This is David Harrison. I need to report a death. David? What happened? I killed my wife. There was silence on the other end of the line. David, are you at the hotel? Stay where you are. We're on our way. David hung up and sat down in a chair. He stared at Emily's motionless body and couldn't believe it was real. 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. David, this is Sheriff Miller. Open the door. David stood up and opened the door. Sheriff Tom Miller and 2 of his deputies were standing on the doorstep. Where is she? Asked the sheriff. David silently pointed to the bed. The sheriff approached Emily, checked her pulse, and shone a flashlight in her eyes. David Harrison, you are under arrest on suspicion of murder, he said. You have the right to remain silent. David didn't listen to the Miranda rights. He stared at his dead wife and thought about how, just an hour ago, they had danced their first dance as husband and wife. Monday, June 17th, 2 days after the wedding. Sheriff Tom Miller sat in his office studying the case file. In his 30 years in law enforcement, he had seen all kinds of crimes, but a wedding night murder shook even him. There was a knock at the door. Deputy Sheriff Bill Carter entered. Tom, Harrison's lawyer wants to see him. What lawyer? Michael Ross from St. Louis. He says the family hired him. The sheriff nodded. Dolores Harrison couldn't afford a good lawyer, but she had savings and was willing to spend everything on her son's defense. Let him come in. What about the photographer, Klaus Wagner? He's gone. The hotel said he left late Saturday night, right after the banquet. Very convenient, Miller muttered. set it all up, and then took off. Bill placed a folder on the table. Autopsy results. Emily Harrison died of suffocation. No other injuries. There are no signs of a struggle on the body. So it happened quickly, said the sheriff. David didn't plan the murder. It looks like a crime of passion. By the way, I found this Klaus's phone number. Do you want to talk to him? Miller picked up the phone. Klaus Wagner? This is Sheriff Miller from O'Fallon. I need to ask you a few questions. About what? The voice on the other end was wary. About the death of Emily Harrison. Pause. She's dead? You didn't know? No, what happened? Mr. Wagner, your relationship with Mrs. Harrison was not purely professional. I don't understand what you're talking about. We have photographs of you with her in an intimate setting. A long pause. All right, Klaus said finally. Yes, we had a relationship, but I didn't kill her. Then who did? I don't know. Maybe her husband? Why do you think so? Because he could have found out about us. From the photos you left in the folder? Another pause. I want a lawyer, said Klaus. You're not a suspect yet, Mr. Wagner, but don't leave St. Louis. We'll talk more. Miller hung up. Bill looked at him questioningly. What do you think? I think that photographer set the whole thing up. The question is why. On Tuesday, Sharon Davis arrived in O'Fallon. She looked exhausted and aged beyond her years. Sheriff Miller, she said as she entered the office. I'm Emily's best friend. I want to give a statement. Have a seat, Miss Davis. Tell me what you know about Emily's relationship with Klaus Wagner. Sharon sighed. Emily confessed to me a month ago. She had been seeing this photographer for 4 months. Did you try to talk her out of it? Of course. I told her she was playing with fire, that David was a good man and didn't deserve to be treated that way. Was Emily going to tell her husband the truth? No. She wanted to end the affair and forget about him. On Friday, we drove to Klaus's motel. I thought she was going to break up with him. But she didn't? Sharon shook her head. He convinced her to run away with him. He suggested she leave everything behind and go with him. And what did Emily say? She said she couldn't, that it was too late to change anything. Miller wrote down her statement. How did David and Emily behave at the wedding? Emily was very nervous. David seemed happy, unaware of anything, but I noticed how he looked at Klaus, suspiciously. Do you think he sensed something? Possibly. Men have an intuitive sense of their rivals. After Sharon left, Miller called the district attorney's office. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Thomas agreed to take the case. Tom, we have a confession, she said on the phone, but we need to prove motive. The motive is obvious. His wife was cheating on him. What about the photographer? Won't he be charged? Not yet. He didn't commit a crime, but he provoked the murder. That has to be proven. On Wednesday, Miller drove to St. Louis to question Klaus Wagner. The photographer lived in an expensive apartment in the city center. His studio was on the first floor, his living quarters upstairs. Sheriff Miller, Klaus said, opening the door. Come in. He looked calm, but Miller noticed nervousness in his movements. Mr. Wagner, tell me about your relationship with Emily Thompson. Harrison, Klaus corrected him. She was married. When did your relationship begin? In February. We met at a conference at a hotel. Who made the first move? Klaus smiled. I did. She was very beautiful, but unhappy. Unhappy? Yes, she said she wasn't marrying for love, that her fiancé was a good man, but there was no passion between them. Miller wrote down, did you suggest she leave her fiancé? Repeatedly. I told her she shouldn't get married without love. And on Friday, the day before the wedding, we met at a motel. I asked her one last time to come away with me, and she refused. She said it was too late, that everything was ready for the wedding. Miller took out the photos from the motel. Did you take these photos on purpose? Klaus looked at the photos. Yes, I wanted us to have some memories. And then you put them in a folder with your wedding photos? No, Klaus said sharply. I didn't put them there. Then how did they get there? I don't know. Maybe I mixed up the folders. Mr. Wagner, you're a professional photographer. Mistakes like that are unthinkable. Klaus stood up and walked over to the window. All right. Yes, I put them there on purpose. Why? I wanted her husband to know the truth. Emily couldn't live a double life. Did you realize that could lead to tragedy? I thought they would get divorced, that Emily would be free. Instead, she died. Klaus lowered his head. I didn't want her to die. I loved her. Then why did you frame her? Because she didn't choose me. She chose a boring, safe life over real feelings. Miller realized that this was revenge by a rejected lover. The trial began on Thursday. David Harrison appeared before District Judge James Wilson on charges of second-degree murder. Defense attorney Michael Ross argued that his client had acted in the heat of passion. My client learned of his wife's infidelity on the happiest day of his life. It broke him. Prosecutor Jennifer Thomas insisted on a murder charge. David Harrison took the life of a defenseless woman. Whatever her actions, death was not a just punishment. The jury heard witness testimony. Sharon recounted Emily's affair. Dolores Harrison cried as she described her son's character. Father Jones spoke about how happy David looked at the wedding. Klaus Wagner was called as a witness. He admitted to having an affair with Emily and to planting the compromising photos. I wanted her to be free, he said, but I never imagined her husband was capable of such a thing. Psychiatric expert Dr. Stephen Grant gave his opinion on David's state of mind. The defendant was in a state of acute emotional distress. His actions were not premeditated. David himself gave a brief statement. I loved Emily more than life itself. When I found out the truth, something inside me broke. I don't remember how it happened. I woke up when she was no longer breathing. Do you regret what you did? Asked the prosecutor. Every second, replied David. I would give my life to bring her back. The court proceedings lasted 2 days. The defense attorney requested an acquittal or the minimum sentence. The prosecutor demanded justice. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict, guilty of manslaughter. Judge Wilson sentenced David Harrison to 12 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 8 years. The court takes into account the exceptional circumstances of the case, said the judge, but human life is sacred and taking it must be answered for. After the verdict, Miller met Klaus Wagner in the courtroom hallway. Are you satisfied with the outcome? I didn't want her to die, Klaus repeated. But you wanted to destroy her marriage, out of jealousy. Klaus did not answer and left. A week later, he sold his studio and left St. Louis. No one ever saw him in the area again. Emily Harrison was buried in the O'Fallon Cemetery next to her parents. The whole town came to the funeral. David was allowed to attend in handcuffs and under guard. He stood at his wife's grave and cried. Dolores held his hand. Forgive her, son, and forgive yourself. I can't, Mom, I never will. Sharon laid flowers on the grave. I'm sorry, Emily, I should have stopped you. A month later, David was transferred to a state correctional facility. Dolores sold the auto repair shop and the house on Maple Street. With the money she got, she moved closer to the prison to visit her son. O'Fallon gradually forgot about the tragedy. Life in the small town went on as usual. But sometimes the old-timers would tell visitors the story of the wedding that ended in murder. Epilogue. 8 years later, David Harrison was released on parole. He was 37 years old. His hair was gray, and his eyes were filled with melancholy. He returned to O'Fallon and got a job as a mechanic at a car repair shop on the outskirts of town. He lived alone in a rented room, worked, and kept to himself. Every Sunday, he visited Emily's grave with white roses. He stood there silently, then whispered, I'm sorry, Em. I destroyed our love with my own hands. People in town shunned him, some out of pity, some out of fear. David understood and didn't take it personally. He was a murderer, albeit an accidental one. Sometimes he thought about Klaus Wagner. I wonder if he remembers that fateful Saturday. Did he have nightmares? Or had he long since forgotten Emily, like one forgets a book one has read? David knew one thing. His punishment did not end when he left prison. It would last for the rest of his life, because there is no torment worse than killing someone you love. In small towns like O'Fallon, stories live on, and the story of a love that turned to tragedy will be passed down from generation to generation as a reminder that passion can be deadly and jealousy can be destructive. But the main lesson of this story is that revenge and betrayal inevitably lead to tragedy. Klaus Wagner destroyed the lives of 3 people, driven by wounded pride. Emily Harrison paid with her life for her inability to make an honest choice. And David Harrison lost everything because of a moment of uncontrollable rage. In the end, there are no winners in this story. There are only broken lives and the memory of how love turned to death on a June evening in O'Fallon.